This episode of Planted is brought to you by Yorma's Choice.
The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Planted with Sara Payan podcast. I'm Sara Payan, your host, and today we have two very special guests. We have Jeff and Bill Levers on the show, the Beard Bros. Welcome, guys. I'm so glad to have you here. A lot of our listeners are definitely know you, know what you do. For some of our other listeners who are new to what you're doing because they're not in the cannabis industry, because if you are, you know who these brothers are. But they're a multi-state operator. They are an advocacy consulting, and one of the things that they're known for the most is their amazing grassroots media campaigns and how they reach out and keep us all informed and keep people informed about some of the crazy things that happen in our industry, along with a lot of the good. So welcome, guys. So glad to have you here today.
Thank you for having us, Sarah. We're happy to be here, and we appreciate the very kind introduction.
Well, it's amazing because you guys have been around for a really long time. But when you really started putting out a lot of media, I think that's when people were like, whoa, who are these guys? And where are they getting all this great information? And I need to follow them and see what's going on, because you're so current and up to date with what's going on that you've become a major source of news and media for the whole industry. But before we get into that, I want to ask you a question that I ask all of my guests, which is, what was your first cannabis experience?
Well, I'm the older brother, so I will go first because we'll do this in chronological. My first experience with cannabis was in Pennsylvania, ironically, with a friend of mine who had moved from Fullerton here in Los Angeles. I was about 13 years old, and his parents had gone out for the night. They were California parents. They were very liberal compared to what I grew up around in central Pennsylvania in the 70s and early 80s. And so my first experience was his parents went out. We found their stash, and we probably smoked out of a piece of tinfoil some flat weed from the early 80s in Pennsylvania.
Jeff, what's yours?
Bill always hates when we get this story because of the connotation that comes with me telling my side of it. So as Bill mentioned, he's 6 years older. So, as I was approaching a teenager, I had a brother who was 17, 18, 19 years old. Obviously, I could tell that he smoked. I kind of knew what smoking was, but not very familiar with it. And I think there had probably been a couple instances prior as a younger brother where I pestered him being like, oh, let me try that. Let me try that. And, aptly, he said no, I think the first few times. But there was a particular night, he and a friend of his were picking me up from YMCA basketball practice when I was 13 years old. This was in Florida, because we moved down to Florida when I was 11 and Bill was 18. And I smelled it in the car because I think they had smoked before coming to get me. And, I asked if I could try that. And I don't know if it was the fact that I had now become a teenager, or maybe Bill had already smoked beforehand, so he was there more friendly and more apt to do so. But he allowed me to try it. I'm pretty sure it was out of a metal bowl that had the little extender chamber in the middle of it, where back then you used to throw a nug in and let it get good and resonated for later when you didn't have any weed. And here's some flat brick weed or some homegrown from one of our friends in the local area. I don't remember which, that long ago now.
That pipe brings me back. That's I think about a tray with that pipe, and then whatever smashed up stuff you had, and you going through it to clean it before. The kids these days don't know how easy they have it.
No, the struggle was real. We would have to break ours up by hand. We didn't use grinders because you'd be worried about grinding the seeds up.
Yeah.
So you had to break it up by hand and use a Frisbee or a tray and the card trick to get the seeds to roll down to the bottom of the tray to separate it. So we're that many days old.
Right? I know. Back home, we didn't have a lot of access to paraphernalia. I'm from Upper Peninsula, Michigan. And there are growers up there too, in the Garden Peninsula and the UP. There were a lot of growers back in the day. I have no idea where the weed came from that we got, but all I know is that every time I went to Ann Arbor, there was a head shop there that I would pick everything up and go back home, and everyone would be like, ooh, you have something that doesn't look like it's been put together from like the hardware store or
Yeah.
worse.
For us, I remember the flea markets is where we used to get paraphernalia in Florida in the mid to late 80s.
Yeah.
All the flea markets had that one smoke shop that had the little curtain in the back. And in the front was the actual smoke shop products, and in the back was the head shop products. The plastic graphic bongs and the
Oh,
the
yeah.
metal pipes and all that stuff. So yeah, that's how we used to have to go get it was usually through flea market shops.
Yeah, well, when I moved to San Francisco in the mid 90s, going into the head shops, you weren't allowed to mention cannabis, weed, anything. They'd kick you out. So the first time I went into a dispensary, I wasn't sure if I could, like, how much I could ask or talk because I thought I was going to get kicked out just like you do in the head shops.
Yeah, back then, I think the only thing that the dispensaries had in the medical era was you had to say donation.
Yeah,
Nothing had a monetary value. It was all donations.
all donation.
Well, and I think it was funny in the smoke shops in Florida always had the signage out saying, don't say pipe or water, but they're like literally educating on you the words. If you didn't know the words, you wouldn't say the words, but then they've got them right there in front of you, and you might say it because you just read it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's it. I just remember like not being able to get over any of that because my mom had like a little brass water pipe that was from Iran because my dad is from Iran, and it was up on the bookcase, and I remember like taking it once and like doing like an air hit on it. I'm like, I think I taste something on this. And then like years and years later, my mom said, yeah, sometimes when your aunt would come to visit or this other friend would come, they would bring something and you guys would be asleep and we'd have it. But I didn't let your dad use it because he was just useless afterwards. I was like, wow, I wish I would have known that. I think like when we look at like normalization now, I mean, research is showing that when we have legalization and it becomes normalized, kids are just kind of like, okay, so this is what my dad smokes or my uncle smokes, and they're not as interested because you have smart kids who are curious and precocious. It's like create some stigma around it and watch what happens. I mean, that's where I was at. I was like, ooh, what does it do? I want to see this. Like, you just don't see this much.
If it's taboo, you want to use it. I mean, I truly believe that the normalization is actually leading to lower numbers of youth usage because it's not something that you have to wonder about and you're told to stay away from. And so, of course, you want to do it. It's something, I mean, kids in California for sure don't know the struggle of the East Coast and what it was to actually have pot or smoke pot on the East Coast 20, 30 years ago. It was a chore.
Yeah.
California is just an amazingly accepting area for cannabis because it's just been ingrained in the culture.
Yeah,
And I think also just in general, it has been what has helped to form the community. You couldn't just go to a normal shop to get the stuff you needed. So you either had to know somebody or you were getting introduced to a friend of a friend, and it was vetted, pre-vetted, and you were building that little network. Whereas it wasn't like alcohol where, you can just go to any corner store and get the alcohol. If you were part of that, and then at school it became in the know, like, oh, that's another smoker, like he and I can catch eyes and know what's going on when the rest of the people don't. So I think that is a little bit of what helped to form the sense of close-knit community that cannabis has always had, because you couldn't just go ask your parents, not that you necessarily could with alcohol either, but you couldn't go and ask like, where can I go get the good stuff? Like you had to find the person that knew that already.
Yeah. Whereas with alcohol, it's like all I had to do is climb up on the counter to get to the cabinet above the sink. And that was pretty much it. But it is like when you look at like cannabis culture and how people find one another. And now, it's funny. When I first started working in cannabis, I had a lot of friends that were like, I didn't get a lot of judgment because I just gotten out of stage 3 colon cancer. So they were like, well, here she goes having a midlife crisis. That's great. Like, let her do it, whatever. But they'd be like, I'm not so interested. And now as things have been evolving, I get more people saying, oh, I tried that gummy, or I tried that drink, or hey, what about like these other cannabinoids that I keep hearing about? Or like somebody called me the other day and they're like, what's the difference between Delta 8 and Delta 9 THC? And I'm like, wait a minute. Like not too long ago, you were like, oh, Sarah, Now you're like, I want to hear about this. And so, we have like the traditional stoner culture, which is a very rich part of our history. But now we're seeing all these different groups of people who are engaged in cannabis use. And I feel like there's much more going on too. There's more of a conversation to be had about people using it for wellness, even though we look at like the medicinal programs, a lot of them are going away. What a lot of people don't know, and they wouldn't know unless they were working, having plant touching businesses or working in dispensaries, that it's actually created greater access for people to use it for wellness because they didn't want to have that awkward conversation with their doctor. And they come in and they're like, so can I use this for sleep? Or somebody said that they were using it because they were stressed and there was a non-euphoric way to be able to use this. I'm curious. And when we see these, I just call them farmer bros, that are doing the big MSOs and they're like, weed sells itself, let's put all this stuff out here. But then they're like, oh, wait, why are my sales down? And why am I having to shut down stores and lay people off? And it's like, well, you're missing out on a wide swath of people that could really use this if you would have an intelligent adult conversation with your outreach instead of going formula retail and being lazy.
Yeah. No, we get that a lot growing up on the East Coast. Many of my friends that stayed on the East Coast and I went to high school with a long time ago, they never had access to cannabis. They were, to control pain or sleep or stress, they were forced toward alcohol and pharmaceuticals because they could use those and not lose their job. And so in the last 5 years, especially, but really about 10 years since cannabis started showing up in a medical aspect on the East Coast, I've had countless people I know from the East Coast reach out and ask us questions because they just don't get it. And living in California, you don't realize that having a medical program since 1996 on, we're living in a bubble. Like people in Pennsylvania had no idea what cannabis was, so to speak, on a usable level for the majority of them until just 5 or 6 years ago, in reality, till it became a medical program they could use. So we've been fielding those questions over and over and over with our friends from the East Coast.
And it jumps back to the point of education and normalization, because to your point and Bill's point that people were using alcohol and pharmaceuticals because that was what was normalized, that was what was accepted. I mean, if you think what they're trying to do with the cannabis driving impaired laws and trying to force impairment on us, but that they allow everybody to leave bars by the tens or hundreds of thousands every night beyond the limit they're supposed to be. And it's just, Russian roulette. Are you getting pulled over that night? Are you killing somebody that night? But people are accepting of that. It's normalized. Our grandfather was killed by a drunk driver back in the 70s on his bike going home from work. I'm sure that impacted Bill's and my decision to not use alcohol as heavily, look for cannabis as a safer alternative, look to go into that as a career path, look to help to be educational and advocates about that, because we had a personal experience through it that was the opposite of the normalization that everybody portrayed it as, and what we saw as normal around us growing up in the Northeast and the Southeast. I was a big drinker during my college times, and when I was going to college football games and engaging with tailgating, I would much rather have been sitting there smoking a joint or smoking a blunt or hitting a bong in the tailgating parking lot. In Florida in the late 90s, early 2000s, you get arrested for that. It happened to me driving home from a football game that I had consumed at an hour and a half before, and my car somewhat smelled like it. During my senior year in college, I spent a night in jail right before my finals at University of Florida, going home from Jacksonville from a Jaguars game. I wasn't impaired. I was speeding, but you drive that way anytime. But I wasn't impaired to the point that I was dangerous on the road, but I was treated as such. So it's just the different dynamics, and it goes back to the whole reefer madness that we've all tried to undo, and the way that the country looks at those two different substances.
Yeah, it's really troubling, and especially and I say this as somebody who I grew up in the Upper Peninsula, Michigan, where hunter safety and deer hunting season was a rite of passage for people. And I always loved target practice, but I myself don't own a gun. Just because of the accidents that can happen. But when you look at when I was doing policy work in places like Oklahoma and Arkansas, one of the biggest concerns with people there was, well, if I get this card, will I be able to go hunting? And, when you think about the amount of violent deaths that have happened with guns and alcohol combined, but they're going to give people a hard time for using cannabis, especially medicinally, and then say you can't have your guns. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's really just a facade. I mean, my opinion on legalization and how it's happening is politicians recognize they wouldn't get reelected if they didn't acknowledge that cannabis was not alcohol or tobacco. And so they did that, but they've also put in barriers so that people like ourselves could go ahead and go, oh my gosh, we can now be a normal citizen. We can now be normal people and we can get a license and have credit and show our income and all these good things. But the reality of it is, I feel like they were just allowing us to normalize it and create the market. And now they're trying to regulate and tax us out. And so the small guys are just getting completely beat up with a system that once the big guys get in, they'll change the regulations, they'll change the tax levels. It's just we don't have the ability to do that because we can't lobby people because we're not able to make any money as a cannabis company. And so I really feel like, unfortunately, I didn't give the politicians enough credit before. Now I see what they're doing, and I feel like it's just been a setup all along.
Yeah. And I feel like it's also a call to action for the public to come out of the cannabis closet because, I remember like when we got into legalization, there were people coming into the stores saying, you're greedy, the brands are greedy, I can't afford my medicine anymore. And that's when I got real with them, because it was also kind of the same thing that happened when we passed 64 here and people were showing up at the dispensaries and like, but it's legal now. Why won't you let me in? It's like, okay, so Stoner Civics 101, guys, we pass it and then we create everything. We don't do it beforehand. That costs money. And now with this, I want to explain to you how taxation works. Let's talk excise tax. And back then it was like, let's talk cultivation tax. Let's talk about, the high cost of doing business in California and the fact that, growers have to do more than people who even have organic farms. And all these costs are baked into the price because nobody would be able to survive otherwise. And they're already hardly surviving. And then they look at me and they're like, oh my God. It's like, so This is what you can do. These are set up this way because your lawmakers that you vote into office have an outdated view of who you are. And so it's time to come out of the cannabis closet and say, I'm a highly functional member of society. I pay taxes. I use cannabis and I vote, because we don't have the lobbying power that we should. I mean, I was just reading the other day that Cheech and Chong just got some lobbyists, and it sounds like it's more on the CBD side. Is that correct?
It is. That's what I read about it as well. Initially I was like, wow, these are the kind of guys that could galvanize support behind it. But yes, it appears it's for their low dose hemp beverages that they're trying to maneuver and push through.
I wish they would use some of that money to go towards some of the stuff to support the small farmers too, because they're,
Well, and the sad part is the people that have the lobby money are the larger MSOs.
Yeah.
And they're not interested in letting the smaller farmers or the small producers or the retails, they're not interested in letting them go. Their interest as a corporation with a bottom line that needs to be profitable is to make their job as easy as possible. And that includes blocking out everybody that they can.
Discover the power of Yorma's Choice CBD products. When we chose a sober life, we searched for the best CBD to manage our chronic pain. In Raywood, Kentucky, the home of Bickett and Boone, we found the perfect solution. Yorma's Choice is a range of topicals, tinctures, bath salts, and gummies. Choose Yorma's Choice for pain-free living. Shop now at furpeaceranch.com. FURPEACERANCH.com.
Yeah. Well, and that's an interesting thing. So I just saw a very prominent person in a multi-state operating company, and I won't bring up any names, but they called out Schumer saying that he didn't support cannabis workers. And I thought, well, let's unpack that a little bit, because this person in general has picked up a lot of companies that had really strong cultures and really great employees. And went about basically tearing down these businesses and getting rid of anybody who was the heart of those businesses. So does he like cannabis workers? I don't think he does. I think he likes his money.
Oh yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say the real problem is that we have everything so fragmented. You have companies like that bottom line is the only thing that they're looking for. You have farmers that, can't even survive from harvest to the next. You have, people trying to do distribution only and operating on 10 to 25% of somebody else's wholesale margin of their products. So the system is set up to be that way. And some of it is set up to be, death by 1,000 knives. You might not see the extinction event coming for you, but it just smacks you in the face one day. And it's the large companies that have come in from other industries that have access to private capital, that have access to funding. And we've moved beyond the speculative nature of that funding, where now it's about operational, and culture tends to fall far down that list of priorities on that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then you have, the general fatigue of people who got into investing in cannabis early on and got burned because, that was back in the day where there were a lot of half-ass companies and a lot of consultants that were out there doing stuff. And, they're just kind of like, well, and people used to come up to me back then and be like, hey, what should I invest in? I'm like, hold on to it. Hold on to it and see like who ends up like being able to do well. And I wasn't about big companies or anything like that, but I was like, just watch these companies because you want to invest in somebody who's got their shit together. It's the combination of the heart in cannabis and understanding the products and the consumers, and then the people who also either are bringing in people that also have that heart and have business know-how, or they've got it themselves, and it's a hard thing because we have all these incredibly talented people in the industry, but they were operating at a different level. And so, they aren't getting the technical support that they need to survive.
Yeah, I mean, that whole era of Canadian stock exchange companies was pretty interesting to watch. The amount of money raised and the amount of money lost is astronomical to what went on in Canada between like 18 and 20. It was a really weird time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've got a worthless piece of paper that will illustrate that.
I
Fortunately.
mean, I remember when those companies were trading at anywhere from like $14 to $30 a share. The average ones now, I think, are a couple dollars max.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing, like, what's seen as winning in our industry right now as far as that goes. That takes my breath away. I mean, yes and no. Are we surprised? We've been around for a while. Like, we've seen how things go. But when you compare it to other industries, you're like, wow, this is just, it's not even mediocre.
I mean, I believe we're one of the only industries that has compounding taxes. Matter of fact, I believe that's illegal in a lot of places, but somehow every state taxes people all the way from the licensing to the retail end. I mean, and in California, you're paying an excise tax at the very end on all the other taxes that went into that price to get to the final price point. So a $40 piece of cannabis at a shop in California has a 27% excise tax. So you're going to spend, I don't know, another $8 to $10 on tax, and that $40 already included like 10 different taxes, everything from a distribution charge of 1% to a square footage of cultivation tax to the retails that pay the city a tax that went into that. And so you've got tax that compounds like 10 times by the time you pay the last tax.
Yeah.
And that's not even corporate greed. That's municipal greed. I mean, we've seen it in Missouri where they've had local municipalities trying to add on 3% and 6% taxes, and they've taken it to court, and the court has come back and been like, nope, they're allowed to do that. They're allowed to stack these taxes on top of things. So it's pervasive, and it's not based in the larger picture of the industry. I've looked at a lot of the city, state, local governments as last in, first out investors. They put in little or nothing other than a piece of paper allowing you to do it. They want their money first, and then you figure out how to make your business work after they've collected their money. And there's very few other industries that operate under that principle. The taxes are all determined after the fact. What can be added into this that doesn't chop away at the margin, like when you look at alcohol and the effective tax rate that alcohol has, with a very comparable model of impairment of people and they claim similar long-term effects. It's more of a dangerous substance, but the tax level that to go along with the long-term issues it creates in society aren't there. And in cannabis, it's the flip side. It's not creating long-term issues. It's actually fixing and correcting and shortening long-term issues where people would have been going in other areas for it. So it should be lesser taxed. And that would then have more inclusivity to it. The fact that it's taxed the way it is, most of the people that put the passion and the intent into the industry are put out of it, or are put a ceiling on what they can do. They can go work for a company and they're never going to rise below, a mid-level manager, where they may have owned and run a farm and then done the distro of it and then done the sales and the marketing of it and all of those skill sets, and they're basically out of options of where to go within the industry.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of really talented people out there looking for work right now. And I think one of the things that's really, it's frustrating too, is like, you hear every time I talk to somebody who's not in the industry and we get into taxation, they're like, oh, but Colorado, look at all the different things they did. And it's like, well, that's kind of the fairy tale that we talk about when we get into taxation, because, if you're going to do that, you should be, that's a sin tax unless you're asking all the companies that do business in your state to be contributing to these programs. Because the people who were in the industry prior to legalization, I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say 9 out of 10 of them already had programs that they were doing to support their communities, whether it was through compassion programs or through, like, when I was, at my company, we actually had a therapist that we hired to do, community classes like yoga, stress and anxiety, things for veterans. And it was part of our business plan, and when legalization came, nobody was able to afford to do those things to support the community. And a lot of the grassroots things that companies did actually had a much greater impact than these taxes would, because as we know, it was supposed to make it easier for law enforcement, but they're still getting a cut of the taxes. And some of those taxes are going to nonprofits that are actively working against the industry.
Yeah, I was literally going to say the most egregious use of cannabis tax money is to give it to the police, who were the instrument of the war on drugs. Like, I've never understood that. Why did any of us agree to give money to the police? The police should give money to us for harassing us and locking us up and basically, just being aggressive towards a very non-aggressive form of consumption, which is cannabis. And so it's wild to me that, like, I think in LA, a lot of the, like, 30% of the LA taxes go to the general police fund, which is insane to me.
That's crazy. I mean, unless you're sending all these folks to school for criminal justice so that they don't have trigger fingers, I'm not interested in that.
Yep. It's wild that we're literally giving the tax money to the aggressors. The people that were putting us in jail before are the recipients now of the legality of it and the tax money. It's crazy.
So going back a little bit to the beginning of our conversation, what got the two of you into cannabis? Because you've been very, very vocal advocates. You've done a lot of the work. You've been here for people who just know you from the media stuff that you do, they may not know, like, how ensconced you've been in this for so long, and what got you there. Like, what drove your heart and soul to be in this work that is wonderful but painful at the same time?
I think part of it was just, we recognized at a young age that cannabis was not what we were told by DARE, was not what we were told by community leaders, Nancy Reagan, for instance.
Nancy.
And we just recognized that we noticed early on that our friends that were drinking or using pills, it was a much worse substance for them to use. They got in more trouble. They had more issues. It was harder to get away from. And so I think just recognizing first and foremost that cannabis was not what it was perceived to be, then got us to look more into, well, how do we help fix this? How do we help explain to people who have been conditioned by society that alcohol and tobacco are fine, right? And cannabis is bad. And so I think our activism just started with the fact that what we were being told didn't make sense as critical thinking goes.
And I think I agree that definitely played into it. I think my perspective, first off, we talked about the medical use of it a little earlier. I don't know if I would say all use is medical, but all use is medicinal. Like if you're using it for things that improve your life and improve your quality of life and your wellness in general, even if that is, intoxicating yourself or impairing yourself from it. But mine was, as I mentioned, finding it when I was an early teenager. I went to a college prep school that was hyper competitive, and I was never a very outwardly. I've always been an introverted person. I've always been, a little bit of social anxiety, social awkwardness, and that is what helped to normalize or put me back to a baseline, like to the point that I would be smoking in my car in the parking lot at school before going in to take like AP and IB level classes with extremely intelligent people and instructors, and that made me feel more comfortable and more confident in that situation. And I just came to realize that, I wasn't hungover. It wasn't causing all the negative things, that the stigmas that you saw talked about it around there. And this was when we were in Florida, in kind of the Bible Belt area where it was really against it. And that's one of the things I think that spurred our move west, was both where Bill grew up more in the Northeast and I grew up more in the Southeast. It was much more in the shadows, much more shunned. You were somewhat ostracized from being one of those people, and we wanted to feel accepted. That was a large part of moving west, was wanting to feel somewhere where we could do this. Bill says it all the time. We wanted to start a company that we could drive up and pull into a parking spot out front of and had our name on it, and feel confident about that, as opposed to, hiding and pulling into a warehouse on the back side and sneaking in and out with equipment. So it felt right to us.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I don't want to say we were future seeking, we were seeing the future or anything like that, but like as we've continued on with it, the rest of the country and the rest of the world has just seemingly caught up to what we instinctively or intuitively already felt ourselves. And we've always looked at it as, how can we make a larger impact? I was actually talking with my girlfriend about this with the previous job that I had prior to that, and why I didn't stick with that, and why Bill and I, what was the impetus to move out. And I was like, I always felt we were both like meant for something larger than just being a worker, being an employee somewhere, and didn't really know where.
Yeah.
And we both tried a lot of different avenues of things, but cannabis was kind of always in the background.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then when an opportunity came for it to come to the foreground.
Yeah. And when we arrived in California, we started to learn the more in depth the stories of Dennis Perone and Michelle Aldridge and the people that wrote wrote Prop 215, and the Mickey Martins, the people that were standing up for cannabis rights. And then that just ingrained even more of a desire to convey that this is not what has been portrayed as for decades and decades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say, I think having the friends and family that we did back on the East Coast, then it just kind of, it formed organically or naturally, where we were telling them what we were learning, how things were going in California. And it was like, wow, like nobody really does have this information unless you're in it, unless you're living it day to day. You really don't know what's going on. And the perception that you're getting from mainstream that wants to come in and cover it is just clickbait things, either really bad things, or they're trying to point out something that should be, they think should be taboo, like the Dravet syndrome and epilepsy and autism with children, and how people were having monumental breakthroughs with their child's well-being and lives. And it's just like, should these parents be giving their kids cannabis? And it's the framing of the conversations, as you watched it over the past decade, a decade and a half, have slowly changed. So we've always felt like we could be a bigger part of that conversation and of spreading that message.
Looking to grow your cannabis business and expand your network? Join the National Association of Cannabis Businesses for just $50 a month and unlock exclusive access to new commercial opportunities and clients across the industry. Enjoy special discounts, free advertising, and access to members-only content. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, NACB tailors its memberships to propel you forward. Visit nacb.com now and join the leading community dedicated to cannabis business excellence.
Yeah, and every time somebody has a positive experience, they want to talk about it. I mean, it's I just had former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura on, and Jesse was talking about how his wife ended up having these seizures and no medication was helping her. And this was something that after they'd been married for many years that she started having. And as a last resort, they went to Colorado. And he ended up going in front of the legislature saying, your governor broke the law to save his wife's life. And it was like, it's an incredibly impactful thing. And everybody that I've worked with who was very anti-cannabis or very nervous about using it, and when they've gotten amazing results, they're like, I'm so angry that the stigma kept me from something that would help me. Alternatively, though, we do have colleagues that like to say that it does everything. And that doesn't do us any service either, because that kind of stuff will bite us in the ass. Like I remember going to conferences and people, introducing me, and it was in a very loving way. They didn't mean any harm by it, but this is Sara, and she cured her cancer with cannabis. And I'm like, okay, I'm a researcher's child. My mother did the clinical trials on the chemo that I took that almost killed me twice. Cannabis did not cure my cancer. Did it help me survive it? Absolutely. It got me eating. It helped with nausea. I didn't have to use a lot of pharmaceuticals that would have had harmful side effects that could have really hurt me. And I'm really grateful that it was there. Are there cancers? Are there protocols to help as a therapy for cancers? Absolutely. But we can't call them cures. There is no cure. Chemo isn't a cure. Hell, people die from the side effects of chemo rather than their cancers, in some cases. But let's have really balanced conversations about the possibilities and the facts, so that we don't have, what some people would refer to as like a Tylenol moment in cannabis, where all of a sudden that stigma, they're like, oh, see, we were right. We shouldn't have let them do that. Let's pull back all these laws and make it even worse than it was before.
No, we agree with you. We always tell people it is not a cure-all. And with being known for producing RSO, we get a lot of very close insights. People reach out to us when they're sick, looking for medicine, and so by default, we end up close to a lot of people who have cancer, and sometimes it does help them, and sometimes it doesn't, and those people move on. And so, over the years, we've been very adamant about telling people it's not a cure-all. We hope it works for you, but it's certainly not a cure-all. And 9 times out of 10, people really use cannabis with cancer to help with the modern medicine side effects. It's not that the cannabis cured the cancer. It's just the cannabis made the modern medicine bearable while it killed the cancer and every other living cell in your body while you were doing it.
Yeah, well, and I actually and it also depends on the individual and their body chemistry, because when we were still in the medicinal days, there was this woman who came in on 4/20 of all days. And she was kind of hunched over. She was in a lot of pain. She had endometrial cancer, and she couldn't have chemo because she had heart issues. So she wanted to use something non-euphoric to help with the pain. So you remember the syringes, the Care by Design, the 18-to-1s. I pulled one out, and I think they were like $55 at the time. God, taking us back. But, I measured it out so that it would be enough for a week's worth for her. Like, just kind of showed her, made marks on there, along with, it was already marked up. But she had friends who had given her money to be able to do this, because she had very, very little funds to be able to take care of herself. Because as we know, when you're sick, it's just incredibly taxing financially. So I was like, well, try this and come back and tell me what you think. This is an 18-to-1. You're not going to get high. The next time she came back, she was standing upright, and she's like, this is really good for my pain. And then a few months later, she came in and she said, my doctor told me I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it, because for the first time we're seeing improvement. And then a few months later, she came in and she said, my doctor said, hey, how about if we just see each other once a year from now on, which is a big deal when you're going through cancer. And then 64 passed, we got into legalization. Our compassion programs had to shut down, and that's because I ended up converting her to my compassion program, and then having her work with Jetty, because they used to have a really great compassion program as well. And when we had to shut all those down, her cancer came back and she died.
Oh, no.
And it's like, though we can't make any guarantees, we are seeing things, but we need to have we need to rely on, these people working with the people who are doing the protocols so that they can have more successful outcomes. Yes, they can talk to us about, getting product and symptom management and things like that. But just like anything, we can't make any promises. Like, it's like your mileage may vary. Granted, something good will happen, but whether it's what you want to happen or not is a whole different thing altogether.
Yeah. No, absolutely. The reality of it is that cannabis is a tool to use in that tool belt. It's not a cure-all.
Yeah.
And we always tell people that the last thing you want to do is get somebody's hopes up. You want to tell them that this could help, but cannabis with every single individual is a different reaction for everybody and every different type of cannabis product.
Yeah, it sure is.
I'm a huge sports fan, so I'll give a sports analogy to it. Like, the person with the cancer is they're the boxer, they're the one in the fight. Cannabis is not even necessarily the trainer, it's the cut man. That you're going to get cut, you're going to get bruised, you're going to get beat, bloodied up, but the cut man's there to, keep all that off and keep you in the fight. And that's how I kind of view cannabis. It helps with your appetite, it helps with taking your other meds, it helps with strength and vitality to fight the illness off. And if people look at it in that sense, I think they'd understand a lot. You're the one still in the fight. If you eat like garbage, cannabis isn't going to save you. Mm-hmm. If you cut out all the things that can accelerate your cancer, all the sugars and all those other things that it metabolizes, and cut them out, and you're using cannabis as well, now you have more of a fighting chance.
Yeah, absolutely. And, palliative health professionals and people who are working in oncology are some of the most open-minded people with having those conversations. And I've done trainings with them at like UCSF and Kaiser and stuff like that, but we still need to have more conversations. We need to get it out more. And I'm heartened by the fact that there are more doctors that are interested in integrative medicine, that they're not poo-pooing all the different things. But when somebody would come to me, I'd be like, just like you said, there's just so much more to it than that. And for people who can't tolerate phytocannabinoids, there are other herbs that they can look at as well. And it's having that conversation of, for a lot of us, for most of us, we're built to use it. For those of us who don't tolerate it, it's okay. There are alternatives that you can explore.
I like to point medical professionals back to the National Institute of Health research they did in the mid-70s, mm-hmm. where they took CBD, Delta-8, and Delta-9 and used it on animals that had tumors. And they showed reduction of tumor size in the middle of the 70s with Delta-8 and Delta-9. CBD didn't work as well with the tumors and stuff. CBD has a different mechanism that it works within the body. So it's not really a tumor reducing or shrinking product, but it does have other attributes. But I mean, that was 50 years ago. Yeah. We were doing experiments that showed it reduced tumor growth.
Yeah. I remember reading that. And then I remember seeing Dr. Christina Sanchez's picture of THC actually creating natural cell death in a cancer cell. And I was blown away. But then I also got really frightened because I was like, oh, because you know what it is? It's one of those things where I remember when I got sick, and a lot of people just meant well, but people come out of the woodwork selling you magic beans. It's like going to my mom's doorstep and being like, hey, buy this juice for your daughter. It'll save her life. And it's like, I just have never wanted cannabis to be part of that equation, And that's the important thing. It's like, yes, it's a great tool and there's so much potential. And and the thing I love about our work is that we're always learning new things. Like, if somebody will say, oh, like Sarah's an expert, I'm like, there are no experts. Like, I'm a subject matter expert. I'm considered a subject matter expert, but that's like not saying a whole hell of a lot, quite honestly, because we are always learning new things and we're always being constantly proved wrong. Like, remember when people were like, oh yeah, you eat mangoes and you smoke and it's going to intensify the effects. And then Dr. Rousseau was like, yeah, no, that's not how it works, people.
The mango terps didn't increase the buzz? Dang it.
I never tried it. I should have, just for the hell of it. Maybe one day we just need to have a big mango salad and smoke some joints.
There you go.
So how did you, is it, you were okay. So you had your business with cannabis. You're very active with activism. I know that you guys were very close with Mickey Martin. And then when did you decide to get more into media? Because your media is popping.
It was actually a necessary pivot. That's been a lot of our success, has been being able to recognize that things are changing and make a change along with it. Ironically, the move to media was a very simple thing at the time. We had products in the Los Angeles market for about 7 years. In 2018, when Prop 64 was implemented, we had recognized that we were not one of the 185 pre-ICO Measure M retailers, and so we were not going to be granted a license to continue doing what we were doing in Los Angeles because of the region specific regulations to Los Angeles. And so we just simply thought, how do we stay on our consumer and patients' minds while we figure out how we get products back into the market? And we had recognized that what we were talking about on our social media, people were really gravitating towards. We had certain insights that people who were not in the industry didn't have. And so that prompted us to start our website, which is where then our media was housed. But it really was just a simple pivot to, what are we going to do? They're not going to give us a license.
Yeah. I mean, the nimbleness has to be there, especially if you love what you do. And I think that's, like, people will ask me, there are still so many people who would love to get involved and do our work. And I get calls all the time about, how can I do that? And I don't ever, my first thought is to be like, bless your heart. You don't want to be part of this right now. Like, wait and see. But for those of us who are, love what we do and can't imagine anything else, like you, I was, searching for my heart's work. I left corporate. I worked in civil rights. And as much as I loved my colleagues and the great work they did, I did operations. I kept the lights on so everyone could do their good work. I didn't find that fulfillment until working in cannabis and being able to help people. And at the time, be able to influence policy at a local level and really make things go. But when you do have to, for those of us who are still here, it's like that nimbleness to be able to stay in the work and also maintain the heart of what we do is such a huge thing. So I just, kudos to you both for being able to keep it going. And actually, I'm imagining it's beyond what you even expected that you would do, because it's huge.
I mean, it is the work we started doing with veterans and cannabis prisoners was really just a passion project at the time. We felt that it was unfair that people were spending decades of time for nonviolent cannabis offenses. We found that it was unfair that veterans would come home and be treated like they weren't citizens, like they weren't worthy of getting the same treatment that anybody else would. The VA would, at the time, 10, 15 years ago, when we started getting involved, the VA might put you out. They might get you actually addicted to narcotics and such. And then when they found out you were treating your pain with cannabis to reduce the amount of narcotics, they would tell you, okay, well, now we're going to stop your narcotic prescriptions, which we all know put you into, I just had a brain fart, puts you into a detox situation where you could be in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
You could physically have problems or die. And so, it was just injustices that we wanted to get behind. And we felt that, they weren't getting enough attention.
Yeah, we have to continue the conversation, because otherwise, if we get into this new phase of the industry, there are a lot of people that would rather just worry about expanding and making money rather than serving the people. And that's not why most of us are here.
If you were involved in California cannabis during the 215 SB 420 times, it wasn't about that. You weren't allowed to profit. Of course, people did, but the point was you were supposed to be a nonprofit that was helping people.
Yeah.
And so we, not coming from here, we took that very seriously when we got here, when we started a nonprofit, and the goal was to help patients. You didn't have customers, you had patients. And so that's kind of where our start came in. And maybe we haven't fully pivoted to the money model yet, but I don't think we ever will. But the reality of it is, for us, it's rooted in medical compassion for people.
Yeah. And now we're we're in the midst of renewing the compassion bill, and
Well,
with it being an election year, it was really hard to find somebody to sponsor it. I really have to hand it to the folks at California Normal being able to make that happen. You were going to say something, Jeff. What were you going to say?
yeah, and I just had the brain fart too.
It'll
No,
come back.
okay, now actually I do remember what it was. The reason we were able to be so compassionate during that SB 215 or Prop 215 SB 420 time was because you didn't have the oppressive taxes on top of you. We were able to go to veteran groups and donate a pound of flour to them and not be concerned about, we were obviously concerned that it was something we grew and harvested, but not concerned about the additional capital tax you had to pay on top of that, that you even still now have to do. And what's really happened is that compassion, that product that was donated and put out to compassion, that all of that capital has now gone to taxes, has gone to regulatory, has gone to compliance. So they've almost taken away the heart and the soul of the industry by not allowing the avenue where people would have gone, hey, I made a bunch of money out of that room. I've got a couple extra pounds. I want to go give this to Veterans Walk and Talk to use on their next couple months worth of hikes, or to this veteran organization to give out at their monthly meetings, or to go to ourselves and interact with the veterans and hand out to them directly and hear their stories and talk about what's going on with them. Like that was one of the ways of an entry level for Bill and I into the psychedelic side of things, because a lot of those veterans that were using cannabis to treat their issues that they had found that psychedelics did, and they didn't trust people growing the mushrooms for them, so they were growing their own, and they were growing it with passion and growing with intent, and then full circle providing that back to us, where we were getting the best quality psychedelic side products. And it's, in a sense, it was almost a pay it forward, where we've supported you all along and had more knowledge and more ability to help. Well, now you're the ones with the knowledge. You're the ones with the value that you can send back over to our way. And that's how things always were really done in that 2000 teens time period. It wasn't always a transactional basis. Oh, you help me now, I help you the next time. We both help that group as much as we possibly can.
Yeah.
And everybody's gotten in the how do I just survive and keep the lights on mode. To your point, you talked about Jenny. We've talked with the Jenny guys and talked about their compassion program and how many hundreds or thousands of people it helped. And they said straight out to us, we wish we could continue that type of a program through now, but we just can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a sustainable practice for a lot of people. Although I have to say, when I started mine back up again, and I'm no longer with the company that I had created it at, but I was really nervous about asking people because I was very sensitive to the fact that everyone was going through a lot. And I was actually really surprised at how many people, of course, the contributions weren't like they were before, and no one expected them to be, but how they really tried to participate because they really believed in it. And I was really humbled by that, because it was, I understood it was a lot to ask. So I was just putting it out there. We've got, we had like, 40 people. And I was like, what can you do to help? Because we were giving products to people that actually correlated with their needs, instead of like, they're all great models, but, there are a lot of models where it's just like, well, this is what we've got this week. Here, everybody. And I was trying to do it in a different way, because I wanted to make sure that people were able to truly like get symptom management and things from that. And also, we have a lot of people who have like dietary restrictions or don't inhale cannabis or what have you. And so I was really, really heartened by the fact that we may not have gotten as many donations as we did before, but people cared enough to like stretch themselves to give something. And that was like, okay, so the heart of our work is not dead. Like people want to give. And as we hopefully are able to change the way things look here, there will be more opportunities to get back to the heart of what we're doing. But before we close, I also wanted to ask you, what did you think about that article about California cannabis and the testing?
That's a good one. We've been watching that, and so we've watched it progress from the time first of all, let me say, we were testing back in 14 and 15. Part of what we learned from Mickey was testing his compassion edible products and using born on dates back in 14, 15, 16, before most people cared about testing or born on dates or package dates or any of that stuff. But so we've known and we've watched it progress. So at first you had the labs were just there and we had to use them. And there wasn't that many labs, right? So California at first, there was maybe 5 to 10 major labs in the state when Prop 64 started. And I don't think there was really that many issues. I feel that all of the issues started when the compression of the industry started. And so we started seeing brands fail and larger brands do better. At the same time, we added a bunch of labs. Well, what happens when you spend a couple $1,000,000 on a lab and now you're not making the money you need to keep that lab open because there's too much competition and there's less and less brands that you can go after. So you're losing market share as a lab because there's less brands and there's more competition. And it seemed to be like around like 18, 19, it seemed like people were testing pretty honestly. The numbers weren't real high and they were showing pesticides and such. In 2020, when we became essential and we had a big bump from being essential during COVID, there started to be a competition. And we started to notice that labs were advertising to brands because they had to. And the moment you start having the testing people start advertising to the people they're testing for, it's almost the same as like a privatized prison. You're like encouraging bad things because bad things end up to money. And so I really feel it's been a morph from the idea was great. And I'm not putting this all in the labs, don't get me wrong. There's many ways during the system that products could either be switched out or could be looked over for testing that they can get through. And so I don't feel that article's representation, even though they say that 47 or 50% or 60% of the products, they were targeting products that they found dirty. And so I don't think those numbers that they gave that half of the products in California have pesticides in it, I don't believe those. I believe they found a few companies that might have not tested the way they wanted to, and then they got more of those products and they skewed the overall results. But
to the point on that, though, I know you saw Bill and shared it as well. Elliot from Catalyst is literally doing it with the top sellers in his store. He didn't pick and choose. He literally went, I'm going to take the most high volume, the one that most of my consumers are touching and consuming, that could have the biggest negative effect, but also the biggest positive effect if they all come back clean. So I think doing it in that aspect and doing it in a transparent way could provide a good rebuttal to that article. We've put out a couple of articles on the testing and the way that the labs operate and the way brands operate and how many just different loopholes and areas that people can exploit all throughout the supply chain to get the results that they're looking for. And then to Bill's point, when the labs are starting to hurt and being able to keep their doors open, they start to accentuate and accelerate and find new ways that they can do those types of things to get the clientele into them, hoping that they can keep them as long-term customers.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any one sector or person or people to blame. I think it's just it's a fail of the system overall, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think another aspect of it that's kind of been a little bit brushed over is that the DCC didn't really start announcing the things that had failed and that were getting recalled off of shelves until some of these articles, ours included, started going out. And now you're seeing a lot more. I mean, we get one or two probably a week in our email of an update of this getting pulled for aspergillus or this getting pulled for too high of a THC content in the products. And we've said for years, the volume of products that are out there, there has to be products that are not falling in these parameters. And we'd be doing we're doing a disservice as an industry to act like every single person has 100% compliance on everything they do, and that there isn't ways to still operate with good intent after a negative test, and that isn't a way to correct some of your processes and show the consumers through transparent means how you're doing things differently to avoid that happening in the future. I mean, it happens in agriculture, it happens in produce with E. coli outbreaks and things like that.
Oh,
They
yeah.
don't stop buying Tyson chicken because they had an outbreak at one of their facilities.
Right. Right.
Like Tyson Chicken wasn't knowingly trying to put 1 million chickens into the industry that were going to poison and kill people. I don't I don't think there may be a few bad actors trying to do that, but I don't think any company or any brand is out there going, I'm going to provide a product to a consumer that's going to cause that consumer to need to stop buying that product at some point in the future.
Right.
Well, and we have to put some blame on the DCC as well, because unbeknownst to a lot of people, they weren't even testing for pesticides until about a year ago. So there
That was a
was no
shocker.
pesticide recalls, only THC discrepancy and other things. And then they came out with a campaign telling everybody that the products are safe when they weren't even testing for pesticides themselves. And so the DCC needs to take some of this blame on themselves, that they have not done a good job. I think I read somewhere they get $130 million a year to run the DCC, and they put together like a $500,000 or $1 million campaign about safe cannabis when they weren't testing for pesticides. I mean, that seems awfully silly to me.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I remember it was a couple months ago, there was an article that came out about a cartridge that was purchased in a dispensary in San Francisco. And, it was, they got an email about it, but the people who are working in the dispensaries are so busy. Their boxes are clogged with emails. The person who got it didn't even see that it was there. The DCC was also supposed to reach out via phone call or a visit or something, and they never did. And in turn, this dispensary ended up getting such a high fine that at that point in time, they weren't even sure if they would be able to survive the fine.
Yeah.
And so it really is like it is a call for better communication and better process. And I find it very disheartening when, I mean, I'm a firm believer in journalism and informing the public and having conversations, but when it is looking like it's pointed at dispensaries and brands, it's like, yes, like you said, there are some players that are not good, but by and large, most people have the best of intentions, and mistakes do happen. And if every time, like, Sprouts were recalled off the market because of the different things, because it always seems like it's Sprouts or lettuce when it comes to vegetables that are like pulled, it's like E. coli or whatever. It's like these businesses wouldn't be able to exist anymore, but they continue on. I feel like there need to be greater conversations, and when we're talking about cannabis and regulatory bodies, it seems like all common sense goes out the window. And it just is further proof that stigma is such an incredibly strong thing.
Yep, I agree.
So what are you guys excited about and hopeful about after we've gone into all these different places?
I mean, for us, what we're doing is continuing to expand the media and expand the product line. And so we started out with products just in California. Our next venture we started last year in Massachusetts. We have products in Massachusetts. And just recently, within the last 30 to 60 days, we were able to launch in Missouri with products.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And then we also have a licensing agreement that we're working with some people in Canada to have. We are picking small farms and picking small batches of their flowers to put out in the Beard Bros name in Canada, while promoting those small farms to hopefully help them get a bigger look at from the market, and hopefully increase their exposure so they can survive as well. On the media front, we are expanding our offerings on the media of what we'll do. We are attending more events and doing more interviews at events to bring more attention to conversations that need to be had, like the ones we had here today about testing and pivoting and how do you survive in this market. And so it's really just concentrating on products and expanding our media.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And for people who want to check out what you're doing media-wise, or would like to try your products, how do they find you online?
Main place they're going to find all of that is our website, Beard Bros Farms, with a PH instead of an F, in farms.com. We have our product finder on there that lists all of our products available in the 3 states. Canada, we have nationwide delivery ability with our partner there. So that one does not show up on the product finder, but anywhere in the country can be delivered to. That's also where you'll find our media offerings in terms of the live series that we've been putting out. starting out through LinkedIn, but ending up on our YouTube. We have 4 different shows currently and a couple of other shows in the works, all in targeted areas. One's on retail, one's on finance, one's on marketing and branding. So just trying to provide more value, more information, and getting that from hosts that are operators in the industry as well, getting that from people who understand and can have the appropriate leveled conversations with the guests that they're bringing on. Also through our social media at Beer Bros Farms all together, again with a PH on Instagram, on LinkedIn as well. Bill and I are both on there on LinkedIn, Jeff and Bill Levers, Levers. I think we also are on Twitter/X, and Meta's not very friendly towards us. So you will find some things there with Meta, but yeah.
I completely understand that. And I get your newsletter, and I really enjoy that too.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate that. We have 7 years now. Oh my gosh, it is 7. No, 6 years. Haven't missed a week. So I think we are 310, 315 episodes of the newsletter.
Wow.
Bill always forgets we had 1 week where MailChimp didn't like us and we were not able to send our newsletter out. So there was 1 week in that we missed, but not due to our own.
We didn't miss it. MailChimp wouldn't send it out, but yes.
I love it. Thank you both so much. Thank you for coming today, but also thank you for all you do to keep the heart in this and to keep people informed. We got to keep these fires burning. We have to keep people engaged, and we have to create a better industry and movement for us to all survive and thrive in the best of ways.
Well, we appreciate it very much.
Yep, I want to continue the Mutual Appreciation Society and thank you for having us on the show. Thank you for doing the podcast that you do and for being the subject matter expert that you are whenever called upon.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to our future conversations. Until next time, my friends. And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend, let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sara Pion on Facebook and Planted with Sara on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsara.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher, TuneIn. We are there. So join us, and until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.